After 65, one of the most dangerous things you can do is reveal too much about your money to your own children. I know that sentence sounds harsh. It sounds cold. Some will say it's distrust, that family should know everything, that hiding numbers is a lack of love. But at 84 years old, I learned that not all transparency protects a family. Sometimes it simply places your peace in the hands of people who do not yet know how to respect it. My name is Harvey Reynolds, and I'm not saying this because I hate my children. I'm saying it because I loved too much, trusted too much, talked too much, and only realized too late that after a certain age, when you open your entire wallet on the kitchen table, some people stop looking at your face and start looking at what can still come out of you. So listen until the end, because what I'm about to tell you is not about greed. It's about dignity. It's about that silent moment when care turns into control and love begins making calculations over your life. Maybe you've felt that guilt before. You sit at the kitchen table, pick up a stack of bills, look at your retirement statement, check what you still have saved, and suddenly you feel as if you're doing something wrong just by keeping certain things quiet. It is not a lie. It is not betrayal. It is simply one part of your life that still belongs to you. But guilt knows how to speak softly. It comes saying, "They're your children, Harvey. They have the right to know." And when you get older, that sentence weighs more. Because you no longer want to fight. You no longer want to seem difficult. You no longer want anyone to think you are hiding something out of malice. So you begin opening small doors. First, you tell them how much you receive. Then, you tell them how much you have saved. Then, you show them where the documents are kept. Then, you explain the value of the house. And before you realize it, your financial life has already become the subject of a family meeting. I understand this because I lived through that discomfort. I also wanted to be a fair father. I wanted to make things easier for Daniel and Linda. I thought that if they knew everything, they would feel at ease. I thought transparency would create unity. But there is a huge difference between preparing your children for an emergency and handing them the complete map of your freedom. The danger begins when a simple question stops being care and becomes inspection. When a child asks how much you spent fixing the roof, not because they are worried about the roof, but because they are already making calculations with money that is still yours. And that is when you need to see what took me years to admit. Privacy does not break a family. Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps a family from breaking you. I spent most of my life believing that a good father should hide nothing from his children. I worked for almost 40 years at an agricultural parts company in rural Ohio. I never became rich, never had a mansion, never was the kind of man who appeared in the newspaper. But I saved money, a little each month, sometimes too little to seem important, but enough to give me security when my body began to grow tired. My wife, Margaret, always used to say, "Harvey, money doesn't buy love, but it prevents a lot of humiliation." Back then, I thought she was only talking about paying bills, medicine, and repairs around the house. Today, I understand she was talking about something deeper. She was talking about the freedom of not needing to ask permission to live. After Margaret died, my children started coming closer. Daniel would call asking if I needed help with the bank. Linda would say I shouldn't be handling paperwork alone. At first, it touched me. An old widowed man in a silent house can easily mistake attention for protection, and I wanted to believe it all came only from love. So I started talking. I told them about my retirement income. I talked about the small savings account. I mentioned the life insurance. I commented on the approximate value of the house. I went. And I did all of that thinking I was being responsible. I thought I was preventing future problems. But here is the mistake almost no one notices. When you give away too much information, you don't give away only numbers. You give away influence. You give away opinions. You give away access. You give away the possibility for other people to start discussing your life as if it were already part of their inheritance. And the first failure did not come in the form of an argument. It came in the form of a calm conversation on an ordinary night around my own kitchen table. It was on a Tuesday night. I still remember because it had rained all day, and the sound of water hitting the window made the house feel even smaller than it already was. Daniel had come over with his wife, Susan. Linda showed up soon after, carrying an apple pie, as if it were just an ordinary family dinner. I was happy. An old man is happy, with very little. A visit, a laugh in the kitchen, someone asking if the coffee is still hot. After dinner, Daniel placed a folder on the table. He said it was just to organize things, so I wouldn't have to worry if something ever happened. Linda held my hand and said, "Dad, we just want to make sure you're safe." And I believed her. Because when a child speaks with a gentle voice, looking into your eyes, it's hard to imagine that conversation might change the way they see you from that moment on. So, I started answering how much I received every month, how much I still had in savings, how much the house was worth, more or less, where the documents were kept, which bills I paid, what insurance Margaret had left behind. Daniel wrote everything down carefully. Susan asked if I had ever thought about selling the house someday. Linda said maybe it would be better for me to simplify my life. At that moment, nothing seemed aggressive. It was all polite, all reasonable, all wrapped in beautiful words. But there is a kind of control that does not come through the door shouting. It comes in smiling, pulls out a chair, and says, "It is for your own good." After that night, something changed. Not all at once, not with insults, but in the tone, in the questions, in the small comments. A month later, when I bought a new armchair for the living room, Daniel asked if that was really necessary. When I had the backyard fence repaired, Linda said maybe I was spending too much for someone my age. And that was when I understood that night. I did not just open my bank account. I opened a door I later had to fight to close. After that, I began to notice something that hurt me more than any overdue bill. My children still said they loved me, still called, still showed up from time to time. But the way they looked at my choices had changed. Before, if I bought something for the house, it was just a purchase. After that conversation, it became a decision to be analyzed. One Sunday, I invited an old friend named Robert Miller to have lunch out. Nothing fancy. Just a simple restaurant, the kind with weak coffee, hot soup, and waitresses who call everyone honey. When Linda found out, she asked how much I had spent. She did not ask if I had enjoyed myself. She did not ask if I laughed. She did not ask if that afternoon made me feel less alone. She asked how much it cost. That was when I noticed the poison. When someone knows too much about your money, sometimes they begin to measure your joy by its price. A repair on the porch becomes wastefulness. A gift for a grandchild becomes recklessness. A short trip becomes poor judgment. Even your generosity starts being treated as a threat. And the worst part is, that they do not see themselves as controlling. Daniel would say, "Dad, I'm only being practical." Linda would say, "We just don't want you making mistakes." But listen closely. There is a difference between preventing an elderly person from being deceived and preventing an elderly person from living. One is protection, the other is possession. When your children start treating your money as if it were an inheritance waiting for permission to be born, you stop being a father and start becoming an obstacle. They may not say it out loud. They may not even admit it to themselves, but every question, every sigh, every piece of advice repeated too many times starts placing an invisible collar around your neck. And the most dangerous collar is the one that comes under the name of care. Over time, I began to think of that night as a simple image. An open wallet on the kitchen table. It doesn't matter if the house is clean, if the coffee is fresh, if the family is smiling around you. When the wallet stays open for too long, eyes begin to fall on it. Not because everyone is evil, not because everyone is a thief, but because money has a strange way of changing the weight of conversations. Before, my children talked to me about memories, about Margaret, about the garden, about my health, about the neighbor's old dog that used to cross my yard. After they learned the numbers, many conversations seemed to pass through some kind of invisible filter. How much does that cost? Are you sure? Wouldn't it be better to save it? Maybe it's time to think about the future. But the future they were talking about no longer felt like mine. It felt like theirs. And here's the part that may hurt you too. After a certain age, many people start to believe that a father's money has already begun to stop belonging to the father. They don't say it that way because it would sound ugly. So they call it planning. They call it concern. They call it family responsibility. But underneath those words, sometimes there is a silent expectation. Don't spend too much of what one day might be ours. That is why I learned to close the wallet. Not my heart, the wallet. There is a difference. My heart could still love Daniel. It could still love Linda. It could still listen, hug, forgive, help when it was fair. But my numbers needed to return to a protected place. Because your financial life after 65 is not just a list of balances. It is the last wall between your will and the will of others. And when that wall falls, even those who love you can begin to enter without asking permission. The biggest lie they tell elderly parents is that total transparency is proof of love. It is not. Love does not require you to expose every balance, every account, every saving, every possibility. True love respects closed doors, especially when those doors protect the peace of someone who has worked an entire lifetime. Society taught parents like me to feel guilty for setting boundaries. It taught us that a good father gives everything, explains everything, justifies everything, even after the age of 80. But almost no one teaches adult children to hear a no without turning it into an offense. Almost no one teaches that care does not give anyone the right to possess. It took me a long time to understand that Daniel and Linda did not need to know everything in order to love me. They needed to know enough to help me in an emergency, not enough to govern my choices before my death. That is the difference that saves your dignity. Preparing your family is prudence. Handing over your freedom is surrender. So do not let them call your boundary selfishness. Do not let them turn your prudence into guilt. After 65, you do not owe anyone an explanation for every dollar you decide to save, spend, or protect. Because trust is not opening your entire wallet on the table. Trust is loving without handing over your own life as collateral. Privacy is not a lack of love. Privacy is the adult name for dignity. After 65, you can love your children, trust them, prepare important documents, and still not hand over every number in your life, as if you were reporting to a court. I learned this late, but I learned it. Daniel and Linda needed to know where to find help in an emergency, who to call, what papers existed, which lawyer to contact. But they did not need to know every balance, every saving, every detail of my retirement, because too much information in the wrong hands becomes control before it even becomes a conversation. The rule I leave you with is simple. Tell what is necessary to protect your life, not enough for someone else to govern it. There is a difference between keeping your family prepared and allowing them to start voting on decisions that still belong only to you. Your money may help your children one day, but first, it needs to protect your old age today. And do not feel ashamed of that. You did not work for decades just to end up asking permission to buy a chair, fix a window, or have coffee with a friend. Love that depends on your bank statement is not looking at you. It is looking at the open wallet on the table. Today, at 84 years old, I am not telling you to distrust all your children, close your heart, or live as if your family were the enemy. I am only telling you not to hand over your financial peace as proof of love, because children can love you and still be tempted by expectation, by urgency, by an imagined inheritance, and by the dangerous idea that your life is almost ready to be divided. Prepare what is necessary. Organize your documents. Choose someone trustworthy for emergencies. But do not turn your old age into an open meeting where everyone gives opinions about every dollar you saved with sacrifice. The money left in your hands is not just money. It is medicine, shelter, choice, silence, autonomy, and dignity. So answer me honestly. What part of your financial life do you need to protect before it is too late? If this message touched you, share it with someone over 65 who still feels guilty for setting boundaries. Comment below which boundary you are ready to reclaim, and subscribe to the channel, because maybe loving your family begins when you finally stop handing them control over your peace.